Hey guys, it's Kevin, finally here to review the first season of Peacemaker. And this show pretty much picks up directly right where the Suicide Squad left off. Peacemaker, was presumed dead, but then of course he was revived by the hospital and things like that, and eventually he comes across the remnants of Task Force X. They basically recruit him for this mission of sorts to where he is going to hunt down these creatures known as the butterflies, and in doing so, this really kind of gets him to sort of question some of the choices that he's made in life and really kind of wrestle with, is he really the hero that he presumes himself to be? So Peacemaker, I was absolutely hyped out of my mind for this show. And I mean, I think you guys can pretty much understand why. I haven't made my best movies of 2021 list yet. Don't worry, that is coming very soon. But the one thing I will say is that the Suicide Squad will most likely be on there, because that is a film that absolutely impressed the hell out of me. It was fun. It was edgy. It was very comic booky. It wasn't afraid to get really weird and out there and just downright just bizarre and graphic at points, and really was just one of those comic book films where you had a director in control and it was his vision through and through. And seeing what James Gunn was able to accomplish with that film, knowing that this was going to be the next sort of stepping stone towards achieving that vision more, I was just so excited to see what he was going to do with the show. I never would have expected for Peacemaker to be the character to get his own show, but just knowing that Gunn was as heavily involved as he was, and that this was going to continue that story, that's really what did excite me here. So I checked out the show, already very excited for it, and I gotta say, this show not only met my expectations, but if anything, it surpassed my expectations. This is one of the strongest debuts, I think, for a comic book show of this kind in quite a bit. Peacemaker is unlike many out there. It's such an outrageous but also a surprisingly very heartfelt and emotional show that I think is really going to, that I can see, I really hope does develop the fan base that it really does deserve, and also ends up being one of the most unique and special of its kind for sure, that I think could really end up being the next great comic book show. But we are just getting into it right now. And look, I feel like I say this when it comes to a lot of superhero media, but the one thing you can always count on, especially when it comes to James Gunn, is the cast here. He always just does such an amazing job of finding the best possible roles for these, wacky roles. And my God, did he knock it out of the park here once again. All of the acting here is just absolutely tremendous. I think everyone really does an amazing job. The big question, obviously, with this show is concerning John Cena, because we know that John Cena can act. We know that he's what he's capable of doing when it comes to the Peacemaker character, kind of diving into the darker aspects of that character in the film and sort of the more sleazier things. And he's also, a real wisecracker in that way. But the real question is, can he lead a show? And thankfully, the answer is a resounding fucking yes. Oh my God, he is incredible throughout this entire show. Not only is Peacemaker so relentlessly funny, but he's also someone that you also really latch onto as a character, because a lot of the time Peacemaker is very oblivious to a lot of what he's doing in this show. A lot of the crude remarks that he makes, or the way that he looks at life, he hasn't really questioned all that much. But now that he's along for the ride, with this, new group of sorts, you can see him really starting to question a lot of his actions. And he really does go through a pretty significant arc in the show. And it really gives Cena the chance to show his emotional chops, which is something that we really haven't seen from him before. A lot of the roles that John Cena's had, it's either been him just kind of, playing John Cena, or diving into these more darker sort of aspects. But here he really gets to show just how great of a dramatic actor he really can be. I was honestly very impressed by the places he was willing to go in this show. There's a scene in the penultimate episode especially that really just blew me away. I did not realize that Cena was capable of doing what he was as a performer, and it feels like we have been very much understating his talents, and I really think that time needs to come to an end. time, because he absolutely shows that he is capable of carrying a role like this. He is capable of a lot more than what he has been given, and it's just absolutely incredible to see. This really is an actor working to their fullest talents, and it's just amazing that James Gunn was able to find this vehicle to really show that John Cena is a full-on movie star. That, the roles that he's been good in, they were not flukes. He really is just that good, and he absolutely proves it here. I was just so impressed by him week after week, whether it's the immaturity of Peacemaker or, like I said, the more emotional and regretful side of him. I just found myself so enthralled when it came to his performance. I absolutely loved what he ended up doing here, and I think he carried the show very nicely. But thankfully, he's complemented by a really, really great ensemble here who also do such an amazing job throughout this entire show. Danielle Brooks was an immediate standout to me. I've always been a big fan of her. I loved her from what I saw of her as Tasty on Orange is the New Black. I say from what I saw because I kind of fell off of that show, but she was always a really big standout to me. I've liked her in pretty much everything else I've seen her in, but I gotta say, I think for me, this is the role that she was born to play. I absolutely loved everything she does as the character of Adebayo, because this is the kind of normal sort of human type character that we need in these shows. When you have a lot of these characters that have experienced a lot of shit in their life that have made them very desensitized to a lot of the violent happenings, someone like Adebayo, who has never a day in her life been in a situation like this, never held a gun, never even killed anyone, never has even held a gun or anything like that, has kind of just been plucked into this scenario. Adebayo is just the perfect kind of foil to Peacemaker as a character. She's someone who is questioning his every move. She's someone that does not understand a lot of the more nihilistic tendencies of these characters, and you just absolutely fall in love with her as a character because of that, because you can relate to her. She really is, I feel like, the audience in that way, because she's the one that's reacting to a lot of the crazy stuff that's happening in the show. She's the one who's do you understand what we just got ourselves into? And I just really loved what they end up doing with her character. She is so great to watch her. There's something that's so wholesome about her. She has such a good dynamic with Peacemaker and really just the entire cast as well. But it's also the arc that she goes through as a character. She really does go through quite a bit of depth in this show, and Brooks really does handle it all in such a amazing way. I loved what she ended up doing in this show. I think she was such a consistent standout for me, and honestly, by the end of the show, I would watch a Adebayo spinoff. If they greenlit a show just about Adebayo, I would definitely be there because I love what she ended up doing here. But the other big standout absolutely is Freddy Stroma, who plays Vigilante. My God, I love this character. I was not expecting to love him as much as I did here. The only thing I've seen Freddy Stroma in prior to the show is Unreal, and I really liked him on that show. He played, the bachelor type character that has a lot more layers to him than you would expect. He's not just this perfect guy. He's got a very complicated family life and things like that. Did a very good job on that show. If you guys have seen my reviews, which I recommend you don't because they're really fucking cringy from 2015, he definitely did a really good job on that show. But here, this is unlike anything he has ever done before. Vigilante is the kind of character where you look at the way Peacemaker acts. Vigilante is, basically an exaggerated version of all of that. All of Peacemaker's more childlike qualities are enhanced by Vigilante. All of the sort of, violent things that Peacemaker has gotten himself involved in, Vigilante is a more enhanced version of. And thank God for that, because he is such a consistent standout in the show. The way that he looks at life, the certain, things that he does, but also the genuine friendship he has with Peacemaker. You just really love him as a character because you realize that he's very childlike in that way. He doesn't really understand a lot of what he's saying. He doesn't understand a lot of what he's doing, and he looks at things in a very, casual manner, and he's such a fun character to watch throughout this entire show. I was a huge fan of him here. I think that he really is just going to be such a consistent standout for a lot of people. He was hilarious, but he also was someone that I generally really did find myself loving in the show. So yeah, I think those two for me really are the big standouts and complement Cena very nicely. But the rest of the cast also does an amazing job here. Jennifer Holland obviously has a lot more to do in this show than she did in the movie as Harcourt. We really dive more into why Harcourt is so cutthroat, why she is, someone that really doesn't take any shit. I liked her a lot in this show. And again, she also goes through a pretty significant arc here. I like what they did with her. Stephen Agee is always so fun as the character Diebeard, who does not like it when you call him that. I enjoyed him a lot in this show a lot. I think Economist is really the guy that a lot of people underestimates, and they really do kind of get into that here, and I enjoyed what they did with him a lot in this show. Chukwudi Iwuji was another big standout for me. I really thought that he ended up being a very interesting character, went in a completely different direction with him than I was expecting, but I'm really glad that they did. And then, of course, you have Robert Patrick, who it is so great to see him in a role like this. And my God, is he good. I mean, he plays such a evil and just horrible character that you just detest every fiber of your being whenever he's on screen. But he is so good at playing this character. He's so convincing with the things this character is able to do. You understand why Peacemaker has acted the way that he has because of his father and whatnot, and I just really liked what he ended up doing. Really, just this entire cast, everyone is such a huge standout. Everyone has such amazing chemistry. Everyone 100% committed to these roles, and it's one of the best ensembles I've seen in a show like this in quite a bit. I think, honestly, everyone is really a huge standout here by the end of it, and I just really liked what they ended up doing when it came to this cast here. All right, now let's get to the directing and the writing, because look, we already know that James Gunn is an insane director. The places that he's willing to go and things like that, are unreal. But my God, I mean, you are not prepared for the crazy directions he takes with this show, because it almost feels like this was a project that Gunn desperately needed, because in his movies, he's been able to capture this very, weird and raunchy side of himself, but here, he's really able to dive deeper into that. He's able to do a much more, longer version of all of that, and it's so great as a result. I think every single facet of things that we've liked about Gunn is just it's amplified here in a really amazing way. I mean, the comedy is just like gangbusters in this show. There are so many great one-liners here that I constantly found myself going back to. There's a great running joke, especially involving Peacemaker's detest of the Justice League, and almost every single episode he has some sort of remark for them, and that's a big part of the show. But another big part of the show that I think works really well with the comedy is just the naivety of this character. There are so many things that Peacemaker says that are so offensive, and the root of the joke is not what he's saying. It's the fact that he doesn't see anything wrong with it. He just kind of looks at it in a very casual manner, and it's so funny to watch these characters, how they respond to it, how they all interact. The comedy is just so great when it comes to that. From the opening scene alone, I think that the comedy just works so well in this show. Yes, it's very raunchy. Yes, it can get very over the top at points, but I really do applaud Gunn for going to those places. He holds nothing back when it comes to this show. He is willing to be as gross and raunchy as you expect him to be. He does have a lot of raunchy humor here, but then he'll also have fart jokes and things like that, and it all just kind of works in a way that you're not really expecting. I mean, there's so many things in this show that if you were to present the idea to me on paper, I'd say that's stupid. There's no way that could work. That's just a little too ridiculous. And somehow Gunn just makes it all work in the end. And I'm just so impressed by the way his mind works. He has such a demented mind in that way, but I'm so happy that he does, because it is one of the most creative approaches to something like this, that I've ever seen. That's why I've always respected Gunn as a director so much. I think, while the comedy is so consistent, I think the dramatic aspects of the show, he also just does such an amazing job with. There's a real heart and soul to this show that I think a lot of people are not going to be expecting. It's not there at first, but it always feels like there's something looming when it comes to the more heartfelt moments. And really, by the end of it, I felt just as emotional as I was entertained by what was going on. And I thought he did a really good job when it came to that. The more, action type elements of the show as well. I mean, all of that is just blended so well here. It's such an interesting vision, and I'm just very happy he was able to see it through. But the writing as well is just so great in this show, because again, there are aspects of Peacemaker's character that Gunn has given you a sample of in the Suicide Squad. That's the best way to describe the Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad. It's like, this is how people view Peacemaker. This is sort of an idea of how he could be presented. And it's not that Gunn, throws that away in the show. I would not say that at all. But what he tries to do is present a far more in-depth and well-realized version of this character, kind of diving into the ideas of why he became this way and sort of the ideology that he has. And I found that all to be very fascinating. From the beginning of the show, it's kind of established that Peacemaker sees himself as a hero. Everything that he does, he sees it with good intentions. Even if it doesn't really have them, he's kind of convinced himself that what he's doing is inherently good, even though a lot of people constantly are telling him otherwise. And I thought that was a very interesting aspect to his character. But the show really does take the time to dive a lot deeper into his past. There's a reason why he has become the way that he has, why he is not very good with, opening up to people, why he acts a certain way, why he presents himself in the way that he does. And when you watch this show, certain aspects of his character in the Suicide Squad are completely different now. While I once viewed this character as someone that was this very egotistical and almost Homelander type character in the Suicide Squad, now I view him as a character with a tragic fall and someone who has become this way because of the influence by his father. And that's something the show really does get into, is the stronghold that his father really did have on him. I thought all of that was very interesting, and something you are very compelled by in this show is really just Peacemaker's relation with his father. It's a very complicated one, and him pursuing this mission, he really gets to do a lot of soul searching. It really gets him to sort of question things that he's done in his past, and I found that all to be very fascinating to watch. But still, Peacemaker is still very goofy. He doesn't take a lot of things seriously, and I like that there still is that aspect of the character. So he's still a lot of fun to watch, but you are latching onto him a lot more because the show is able to dive a lot deeper into his character in a way that they simply would not be able to do in a movie. So I'm really happy that Gunn was able to get the chance to really just show us a different side of this character that we really haven't seen before. I think it was very well done in that way. But the other characters, like I said, I think every character in the show has some kind of an arc, something that they need to overcome. For Adebayo, it's the idea, again, of violence and being on this team that is all about it. She doesn't really understand it. She doesn't understand how Argus really works. She doesn't really understand, what they're really pursuing, what she's really getting herself into. And I found that arc to be just as compelling as what was going on with Peacemaker, because while Peacemaker's kind of questioning a lot of the violence and horrible things that he's done, Adebayo is kind of questioning, why would I ever get myself involved in something like this? Is this really the line of work that I want to pursue? And I found that to be very interesting when it came to her character. Like I said, she's a lot of fun to watch, but you understand why her and Peacemaker are so drawn to each other in that way. They form this relationship that is very unexpected. These two are very much kind of butting heads at first, but they grow this fondness and respect for each other that I really did love seeing in this show. The way that kind of change, the way that grew throughout the show, I found to be such an interesting sort of thing. The relationship that these two form and the care that they have for each other is something that you really just find yourself latching onto, and I really did love that a lot. Or whether it's the character of Harcourt, someone that is so just no nonsense in that way, very much down to the mission. Doesn't really seem to have a lot of fondness for people and things like that. You really start to see her change as a character as well, and I really like that when it came to, you know, Harcourt as a character, or Economist. There's actually a lot more for him to do as well. We get into sort of like his role on the team and how people don't really take him that seriously, and I found that to be very interesting. Every single character on this show has something to latch onto. You know, really, they do a really good job, I think, with getting you into this character, really latching you on to everyone. I think the writing here is just so well done in that way. But it's also the mission that they're pursuing, Project Butterfly. What I really like about the show is that it kind of feels like the opposite of what a lot of the Disney Plus shows have kind of struggled with. And I don't want to compare it to Marvel, because that's not really what I'm here to do. But I'm going to compare it in this sense because it's similar in the sense that it's a, you know, TV series and it's weekly and things like that. A lot of the time, Disney Plus has done these like last minute sort of villains that are like, oh, they were behind it all along, and you know, they were kind of pulling the strings, and they get this like final battle, and it almost never is satisfying. Like, that's the one thing I will say, is that, you know, even if I like some of these shows, the one thing I can say is that a lot of the sort of final battles have never been that satisfying to me, because they just kind of were revealed at the villain at the last second. And Peacemaker is the complete opposite of that. We know from the very beginning what what the butterflies are all about. We know what they really want to pursue, and they do a really good job of diving deeper into their threat level and what they really need to do to combat against it, and the real effect that the butterflies are going to have on them. There's this one scene especially. It's in like episode 6, and oh my god, it was absolutely insane when you start to see what the butterflies are all about. But even better than that is the show does give them a clear motivation. And by the end, I kind of looked at the butterflies in a different way than I did from the beginning. And that's something I really liked about this show, is that they really did take the time to dive into the villains and what they're really all about. And I think that's something that they just did an amazing job with here. And like I said, the ideas of like heroism and things like that, the way it's presented in this show, it's very interesting to watch, whether it's, you know, the way that Christopher sort of looks at himself, but also the way he kind of looks at Harcourt, because Harcourt is someone that he's drawn to immediately. You think it's just going to be like a sexual chemistry, but there again is a genuine bond that sort of is formed there, and the way that she's kind of, you know, looking at things as well, and things that she's done, I thought was also just very interesting to watch. You know, I think the way the show deals with that, what does it mean to be a hero, I think is something that the show dives into very well here. Toxic masculinity obviously is a very big theme of this show, as well as like, you know, childhood trauma and things like that. But I think all of those themes are very well dived into. It never feels like the show is just trying to overcompensate those themes for a very like basic story. This is a very complex story. There's a lot of places it went to that I wasn't really expecting them to do, and I'm really happy that they went to those places, because I think it made the show that much better as a result, where they ended up going in this show. And then White Dragon is really the other big threat in this show. And like I said, I think they do a really good job at developing the very toxic relationship between Christopher Smith and his father Agee, what he was sort of like influenced to do in a way. All of that is very well done, and they never once try to humanize this character. They realize like this guy is the worst and he's terrible, and they don't really need to do that much more with him. So that was never really a problem for me. Like, I don't really feel like they had to dive any deeper into his character, because he's just a really hateful guy, and that's kind of the best way to describe him. There isn't really a lot more going on there, but again, it's the way it's affecting Christopher Smith. Some of the things that Agee has gotten him to do, that's what really attaches you to this. That's why you really latch onto this particular storyline. And I think especially when we finally saw, you know, what really pushed Christopher Smith to become Peacemaker, I think they did a really excellent job with that. But I want to reiterate, this show is still so much fun to watch. I mean, there are so many just amazing jokes scattered throughout this entire show. I think there's very rarely a moment where I wasn't laughing hysterically when a joke did appear. There's a great running gag with Chris's pet Eagly, who is basically like his trusted companion. I don't want to get into much more than that, but I love what they end up doing there. Just again, the writing here is just so great, whether it's the character writing, whether it's the comedy, all of that just works so well together, and I just really love what Gunn was able to accomplish when it came to this show, and I'm so happy that he was basically given free reign to basically do whatever he wants, because it makes for one of the most ambitious and, I think satisfying approaches to a comic book show like this that I've seen in quite a bit. Let's talk about the cinematography here, because that is something else that absolutely is such a big standout in this show. I mean, the Suicide Squad had such a specific life to it, look to it, and that is very much carried over to this show. Like I said, it is very graphic at points. There were many places it went where I was like, oh my god, I wasn't even expecting them to go as far as they did in terms of the violence on the show, but every bit of it felt necessary. Never really felt like they were overdoing it or anything like that, and I thought all of the action sequences and things like that were really well done. There's one right in episode 1 that is such a memorable moment, and I think just such a great job of just summing up the pure chaotic nature when it comes to this show with the action sequences. There aren't a ton of them, but whenever they appear, they are a huge standouts in this show. And I mean, just what they were able to accomplish with this show, there wasn't any budget lost or anything like that. It just very much carried over what worked in the Suicide Squad to here, but I think even maybe even better in this show. The action is just so consistent, and I really loved what they were able to do, but just the look and feel of everything as well. So many amazing shots throughout this entire show. It's just really well put together in terms of cinematography. The score as well is another big standout for me. Peacemaker, he grew up in the 80s, so he has a very specific type of playlist of songs that he likes to listen to. There's a lot of great needle drops in the show, but I also would be remiss if I did not mention the intro for the show, because my god, this is one of the most dynamic intros I've seen in so long. I feel like these days in TV, there aren't a lot of like really great intros out there, because either you're getting the like kind of tired, like just like, very dark and like just like sort of like pieces of things that you're gonna get throughout this show in intros. We've seen that all the time. Or you don't really get an intro at all. You just get like a title card, but you get a full-on intro in this show. They really go all out to make it one of the most memorable things about this entire show. That is all I will say. It is an intro that cannot be skipped. If you do skip it, I don't understand how. Like, legitimately, I don't know how you can skip this intro. It is so creative. It is so hysterical to watch. I just love everything they did when it came to that intro. Perfectly just sums up the wackiness of this show, and just the uniqueness, I think, of this show overall. Really loved what they ended up doing with the intro here. And the editing. The show is only 8 episodes long, and I think it honestly was very well paced. Some of the episodes only run for 40-ish minutes, but I don't really feel like there was ever like pacing issues with the show or anything like that. I think overall everything was laid out very well. And the way we do leave things off, there is a lot more potential for a season 2. There's a lot more places they can go with this show, and I'm very excited to see what they end up doing. This show was in fact renewed for a second season, and I like where they are headed, without spoiling anything. I like what they're diving into, and I think it could end up being a very interesting sort of addition to this show with what they are really getting into here. But with that being said, I do want to dive into spoilers, because there's a lot that really does happen in terms of spoilers on this show, so I do want to get right into it. Now, the first thing I do want to talk about is the big reveal in, like, episode 1 of this show. I was absolutely shook when we saw the reveal that Adebayo is actually the daughter of Amanda Waller. I thought that was such a ingenious idea, because it actually does make a lot of sense for this character. Amanda Waller is someone who is so cutthroat, and she wants things to be done in her way. She's so like militant and things like that. She's very authoritative, and Adebayo is the complete opposite of that. She's very like free-spirited, but she also can be very, petrified of certain things she's getting herself involved in. It was really interesting to see her kind of following her mother's work, and you didn't know for a while if she was actually going to, if what she was doing was for a noble cause or if she's just like infiltrating their mission. And for a while, it seems like she's just there to expose Peacemaker. She's just going to do what Waller kind of tells her to do. But because of the genuine bond she forms with Peacemaker, even though she does end up exposing him to like the butterflies and he gets blamed for like all the damage that went down and things like that, I like that by the end of the show, she's at a point where she actually exposes Task Force X and like the really corporate and very inhumane side of it, where like Waller was willing to, kill all of them, and she was willing to, just blow up their lives if they didn't follow her orders. I'm very interested in seeing where that is going to go, but that was such an unexpected direction that I thought really did work out for this show. And, there's that great moment where, throughout this entire show, you're not really sure if she's going to be fully loyal to the team or if she's just there to, sort of betray Christopher and sort of like, expose all of his secrets. And when she eventually does, you can see how much this kind of like eats away at her. She doesn't like what she ended up doing. And the moment in the finale, where she finally just says fuck it and like picks up the gun and starts killing people, it's just such a rewarding feeling. And I just found myself so attached to Adebayo as a result. It's why, for me, I think she was probably the most relatable character, because she goes from someone that is so adverse to everything that's going on to becoming so comfortable with the team that she kind of considers them family by the end. I just cannot wait to see where they're going to go with her character, and her undergoing that shift of just exposing Task Force X and all the shit that's been going on. I'm excited to see how that's all going to play out, and I really like what the direction that they're taking her in overall. I think the next two characters I want to talk about are both Harcourt, and then I also want to talk about Myrn, because they kind of play into, similar ideas in this season. Harcourt, she starts off, she's very cutthroat, she's very no-nonsense in that way, and when Peacemaker starts seducing her, she's just, like, not about it, and you can see that that's not really something that she's into, but the more the show goes on, the more these two really kind of start to understand each other. Peacemaker brings out this sort of lighter side of her, which I really like getting to see, and I think that's a perfect example, what they do with that character of what you can't do in a movie. And that's why I'm really happy we were able to get this series, because I think a character like Harcourt in a movie, she'd just be like no nonsense all the time. That would be her character. But here we're able to flesh her out a lot more and see these different sides of her, see why she is so closed off, why she has become so entrenched to like, this mission and things like that, how it's basically become like her life in that way. I thought all of that was really fascinating to watch, and, her starting to gain a mutual appreciation for Peacemaker to the point where I could actually see these two potentially dating, later on in the series. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think what we get at by the end of this season is that the two do very much feel the same way. This is a little bit more mutual now, and I really like getting to see that. I think there's a lot of great stuff they do with her character, and then the character of Myrn. I will be honest with you guys, for a while I didn't really like him that much, because I just didn't really feel like his character had all that much of a role. He was kind of just like, he was the leader, he was barking orders to them as to what they should do and things like that, and that's kind of it. He didn't really do much else, and when it's eventually revealed that he himself is a butterfly, but he's realized that, he was on the wrong side of things, and he's kind of trying to, improve their species as a whole, and kind of, he's like seen the error of their ways. I thought that was really interesting to watch, and I really liked what they ended up doing with his character, and how he is trying to like use his body, to stop the rest of the butterflies, and how he doesn't really get to achieve that mission. I really loved, and Chukwudi Iwuji just really killed it in this show, especially in that last episode where he does end up getting killed. I was not expecting them to kill off Myrn, but they do, and I was surprised by how affected I was by it, because like I said, this was a character that I didn't really feel much towards throughout the first couple episodes of this show. But when they started to play more into, who he really is and, the path that he's pursuing, I found him to be a very compelling character in that way, and I thought he did have a really satisfying end. So I really like what they end up doing with him. I think he was a character that really worked for me. Hell, even Economist, I mean, throughout the majority of the show, nobody's really taking him seriously. He's constantly finding ways to weasel them out of situations. Like, he's always the one to save them, and nobody's really giving him the credit. You got Peacemaker constantly calling him Diebeard. They even tried to focus on that a bit and why that bothers him and why he cares so much about the team. And so that's another thing that, like, they just would not have been able to do had it not been for, had it not been for the for this being a show, for them getting that time. I think that's something that they just did a really great job with. These are all characters I just felt so connected to by the end. But of course, I do need to get into the bulk of things when it comes to Peacemaker and everything going on with both his father and Project Butterfly, so I guess we'll just get into it. Yeah, I was not expecting them to play quite as hard into everything going on with Agee as they did this season. I thought that we would gradually, get through it. I thought that he, end up in jail, and then we'd end the season with him wanting to kill Peacemaker, but that's not really how things go, because at first, yeah, Agee is blamed for a lot of what Christopher has done. He's in jail. He's being interrogated he's being interrogated by Chang, who I really liked a lot. I thought Sophie as a character, he's being interrogated by Sophie, who I really liked a lot. I love the back and forth between them when he is just being so, like, obviously racist, and you can see how much this is, like, bothering her, and he just continues to go off. A lot of just really good, like, dark humor there, but where they end up taking that character, where now he does want to kill his son, and Peacemaker eventually does get to kind of grapple with what ended up happening, because throughout the show we know there's something eating away at Peacemaker. He's killed a lot of people, but there's one especially that's really kind of getting at him, and it turns out that Agee pretty much kind of set up the killer mentality in Christopher. He made him to be this fighter of sorts. Eventually, he had him fighting against his brother, and at that point, Christopher was just so strong and kind of like this child soldier of sorts. He ended up killing his own brother, and he's never fully, like, come to terms with it. And in the moment where he finally gets to confront Agee, it's a really satisfying moment, when he's, like, crying out about everything, and this is someone who always told him, like, don't worry about your emotions, like, you need to, like, keep them in check as much as possible. Seeing him finally just, like, let loose, it's just such a satisfying moment, and I really loved what they ended up doing when it came to those two characters. I think that Augie's the only character in the show that doesn't have any sort of character development, and that's understandable because his character is just so lost and so hung up on the very problematic sort of views that he has. He doesn't really want to change it anyway, but Peacemaker still can. He doesn't have to go down that same path, and when he makes that decision to kill his father, I think that's really what is going to help him. And I love the ending where, he constantly saw his father as someone that was kind of, like, torturing him and taunting him, but it gets to a point where he has, gotten his father to be a lot more silent, this vision that he's seeing of him. It's a good way to keep Robert Patrick on the show, but not have him overpower everything that's going on. The character hasn't overstayed his welcome in any way, and I thought they did a lot of really great work when it came to the very difficult relationship between those two characters. I really like what they end up doing there a lot. And then, of course, we do have to talk about the way this all wraps up with Peacemaker taking on the Butterflies. And my God, I mean, they went way more into depth with the Butterflies than I ever really would have expected them to. And again, I think it's just a testament to how much better this show did with its villains compared to, say, like, and again, I don't like to compare, but, like, say, like, the Disney Plus shows. Still, both are really great, but I think Peacemaker just did a much better job job at like fleshing out these villains and their motivations. And I think it's especially, you know, not seeing like the main face until the very end, the way that they still feel so fleshed out. I think they did such a great job with that, with like them literally finding this huge fucking cow, and their whole mission being that they are embodying, you know, all these different humans, and they're gonna try to take over the world and things like that. But it turns out to be a little bit more complex, and that's something that I really did enjoy quite a bit, because at first, obviously, their whole mission is we just gotta kill this cow, we gotta go after all the butterflies. And can I just say, the scene where the butterflies like infiltrate Sophie and like the entire like police squad is easily, I think, the most epic scene in the entire show. I was honestly stunned when they're just getting in there and just gunning everyone down in the and just coming after all of the precinct one by one. It was just, it was amazing to behold. The song choice, everything about that. One of the best scenes in the entire show for sure, but also one of the best scenes, I think, is when Christopher, you know, has this moment where basically, you know, the butterflies want him to join them because they're very similar in that way, and he kind of has that that opportunity, and you know, they get a little bit more into their whole motivation, and you know, we get to see a little bit more of the butterflies' perspective on things. For them, they see humans as someone who kind of like took the land from them, and they kind of want to get that like profit back and whatnot, and we see the moment where it really is kind of the moment where we see Peacemaker finally make a choice that he does actually want to be a hero, and basically tells them that, like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you guys are still killing all of these innocents, and blows up the cow. And again, it's just such a satisfying moment, because the whole season he's been wrestling with, am I a hero, or is that just what I see myself as? And this is really the moment where he decides that he is going to be a hero, and it's a really satisfying moment, the way that all turned out. And the way this wraps up, I think, you know, obviously the butterflies are gone. The Goff is still very much out there, and I think we could potentially see more with that, but I think season 2 is going to be more about Peacemaker fully, really putting himself into this role, really coming to terms with the type of hero that he wants to be. He's never really been heroic in that way. He's always had some kind of emotional baggage because of Agee, but with Agee gone, and with the butterflies, you know, pretty much destroyed, and with Task Force X exposed, there are a lot of different avenues that this character can go, and I think it's very exciting that we get a season 2, because I'm very interested in seeing what exactly they're going to explore with him. You know, how is he really going to fit into that role? I'm very interested to see how that's all going to play out. And the only other spoiler I do want to talk about is the recurring joke throughout this show with Peacemaker and him talking about the Justice League and, you know, kind of how much he hates them, and this recurring joke about Aquaman and how he fucks fish and things like that. The moment where Aquaman and the Flash actually step in, first of all, I can't believe they actually got Jason Momoa just for like a quick little cameo. Like, the fact that they were able to do that in itself is awesome, but it's what he says there, where, you know, basically he's telling Barry that it's not true, and you see Barry isn't necessarily as sure about it. It's such a great moment, and it's the perfect way of like acknowledging that these characters exist, but not having them overcrowd what's going on, because it would make sense that like they show up late and that they had to defeat this threat all on their own. Like, is so in line when it comes to those characters, and I really liked what they ended up doing with that. So yeah, I think that was it was a really fun sort of recurring gag, and I think that even had a really great payoff like towards the end. So overall, guys, Peacemaker Season 1 is really everything I could have wanted. It is such an outrageous and raunchy show that really never stops when it comes to the humor. It is absolutely relentless when it comes to the violence, even more so, I think, than the Suicide Squad really was. But it also has a real sense of heart and character to it that I don't think many people are going to expect. Such a wonderful performance from John Cena, Danielle Brooks, and Freddy Stroma, really being like the standouts, I think, in this entire season, but really the entire cast, I think, does such an incredible job. There are so many scenes that are just absolutely unforgettable here, and really does show what James Gunn can do when he's given the chance to do something a little bit longer, when he's given the chance to do a full series like this. It's just so great to see his creative juices really come through. I've always been a fan of, you know, his vision and things like that, but this truly is the definition of just someone having their vision shine through fully, and thank God for that, because I think what we have here is just the start of what could potentially be one of the best comic book shows I think we've ever seen. It really dives deeper into Peacemaker's character. It has a lot to say about, you know, choices and really being a hero and things like that. And I think this show was really everything that I could have hoped it would be, and I am going to give Peacemaker Season 1 an A. So overall, guys, in my review of Peacemaker, let me know what you guys saw this first season overall, left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.